Welcome everyone to this week's episode of In the Know with Kat Bobineau. Today my extra special guest is coming all the way from Jacksonville, Florida. Please meet Kate Chorba, and she is a field scientist. Hello, Kate.
Hello, Kat.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. And yourself?
I'm doing great. So why don't you tell us what you do as a field scientist?
So I work for an environmental consulting firm, and basically I go around the country and inspect sites for environmental degradation and look into remediation, possible remediation, and make sure there's no problems. And then I come back and I write a report about those sites that we give to our clients.
Okay, so what type of clients are they? Are they like big businesses, small business, or what kind of people do you guys
It
consult?
it varies. Typically, these kind of studies, they're called environmental site assessments, and they're required by financial institutions anytime there's a transaction or a transfer of title for properties. So we have a big project that we work for several companies that own cell phone towers. That's our bread and butter.
Oh,
But we also do, any kind of real estate transactions that are commercial.
okay, okay. So when it comes to being a field scientist, what got you into that? What got you into this particular field?
Uh, I majored in physics as my undergraduate degree. And what they don't tell you when you major in physics as an undergrad is that you can't really do much with that degree with just a bachelor's. Usually you
Right.
have to go on to get a master's or a PhD, and I didn't necessarily realize that. So after I graduated college, I was looking for jobs, and I worked for Kaplan for a while teaching at their MCAT course.
Okay.
And I came across this ad for a job that was basically like, do you want to travel 90% of the time? Do you have a science degree? And I was like, that sounds great. And so I came into this field that way, kind of by accident.
Okay. And I mean, you don't have to answer this question because I don't want your job to particularly see this, but how do you feel about traveling 90% of the time?
Well, I actually love it a lot. The travel has slowed down as I've advanced in my career. Um, I I travel more like 50% of the time because now that I've changed my skill level, I can write the reports for the sites that I visit. So when I first started, I would go out to the sites, get all the information, bring it back, and then give it to a senior level scientist to write those reports. And now I'm doing more of that on my own. And as my career progresses, I should travel less and less, which is, it's got its ups and downs.
Right. I'm sure the travel part is amazing. And you said it's throughout the nation, right?
Yeah, so I've been to, in my first year actually, working at my firm, I had been to every state but Hawaii. And I've
Wow.
also been to Canada and Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite place?
Uh, I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. In terms of like sheer physical beauty, Alaska is probably the best place that I've been. I mean, it really is it takes your breath away because every direction you look in is like looking at a postcard, and it's very rare nowadays to see anywhere in nature that you don't see something man-made. So for instance, even if you're out in the middle of like, nowhere, Idaho, you're going to look out and you're going to see electrical wires or telephone wires or road. And in Alaska, you can still see these vistas that are kind of uninterrupted by any kind of human development. And that's really cool.
That
Another place that I really think is magical, and I think everyone should go to, is right in your neck of the woods, and that's Northern California.
mm-hmm.
All those redwood forests are just like, it's straight out of Middle Earth. There's something very enchanting about and magical about those places and driving through them.
Yes, absolutely. I do. I love Northern California and the redwoods. And what I particularly like about California is that you have everything. You can go to the mountains, you can go to the beach, you can go to the redwoods. So it's all there. But then that's me tooting my state's own horn. I've never been to Alaska. I hear it's beautiful. However, the winter, I don't know if I can do that.
The first time I went to Alaska, it was in the winter, and there was about, I think it was 5 hours of sunlight because I went to Anchorage, and then the Kenai Peninsula, and it wasn't as cold as I thought it would be, but it was eerie to not have the sunrise until like 10:30 in the morning. and then it never really got above a certain angle above the horizon, which was just it was strange.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, Maine is very similar. I mean, it has more hours of light, but again, in the winter in Maine, the sun doesn't rise very far up either. And as somebody who's from Florida and is used to sunshine all year round, it was a little eerie.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that being very eerie. I'm imagining it, and I don't know. I couldn't do it. I would only reason I'd go to Alaska in the winter is for the Northern Lights, and I feel like I can see that in one weekend and come back. I don't think I could do it like an extended stay. But I understand Alaska is really beautiful, and like, where is your least favorite place that you've been?
Uh, I am not a huge fan of traveling in the southeast, only because I live in Florida, and so it's not really like anything special or different. So when I get local sites or I have to travel within Florida or Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, it feels like this is stuff that I could take my own trip to, and it doesn't really feel like exotic or different or new. So that's my least favorite part of it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I get that. I don't necessarily like driving throughout all of California. I'm like, okay, it's kind of the same. So we don't have to do all that. So let's go back to you and going to undergrad. What undergrad did you go to, and why did you choose physics?
I went to the University of North Florida, which is the university here in Jacksonville. I went to to college later on in my late 20s. I had gone to college when I was 18, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it didn't really work out for me. So I dropped out, and I did several different jobs. And what I found was I really wasn't satisfied sitting at a desk all the time. And so when I wanted to go back to school, I knew I wanted to do one of the hard sciences, chemistry, biology, physics.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, biology was almost like learning a foreign language. It was very verbal. There was lots of like words and definitions, and that just wasn't really my thing. And chemistry, you couldn't see anything that was going on. It was all this like kind of invisible process. But physics, like you push a block and it moves, or you like you ram two cars together and you can see what happens, and that's why it appealed to me. And plus, I liked the challenge of the math and all the stuff that came with it.
Okay, so as a biologist, I feel doesn't hurt my feelings, but yeah, there's a lot of memorization. I think when it comes to biology, and then especially if you start to specify, microbiology, you got to learn all the words and all the processes with that, and same thing with animal biology. But then I guess I feel like chemistry. I guess I feel you on chemistry. Like you can make something explode, but then that's about it. Everything else is just molecules and molecular weight, and that I didn't get that very well. But I didn't get physics either. Physics was, I think it was the math part that kind of went over my head.
Right, right.
So did
That
you
gets a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so. Did you have someone who was like helping you decide that physics was going to be the best bet, or do you say it was your experience before going to college and figuring out that physics was your best bet?
I think I didn't really have anyone pushing me in that direction. What it was is that that period of time between when I dropped out of college when I was younger and when I went to college in my early 20s, or my late 20s, I had a series of jobs doing the things that I thought that I would like to do, but none of those jobs were challenging to me. And so when I went back to school, I thought, I never thought I had a natural aptitude for the sciences, and I wanted a challenge, and it seemed like physics was pretty challenging, and that's kind of what I wanted. It was difficult in the sense that I was one of maybe 3 women in the physics program, and it was always difficult because in the beginning of each semester, when there would be lab groups and stuff, like nobody ever wanted to be in the group with a female.
Oh
So
my
it
gosh.
made the 3 of us, like the 3 girls that were in it, like much closer. But it was challenging in that respect, and I think that's a challenge that probably a lot of women face when they go into physics, especially, but the STEM in particular.
Yes, that is a big problem that we have in the STEM world, so to speak, is a lot of girls or young women don't see themselves in that field, and then when they go to college, there's no one like them, their gender in the classroom. And like you said, well, if you don't mind me asking, what years did you go to college?
I think I started college in like 2010, and I graduated probably in like 2013, I think.
Well,
Um,
still 7 years ago. We're now in the new millennial. It's 2010, and you're still seeing this issue where you're one of three. And not only that, now you have these groups that don't want a female in their group, which is so sad. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
well, it was so funny though because at the beginning of the semester it would start out that way, but then towards the end, all of a sudden they would start coming to us for questions because they would realize that we knew what we were doing.
Right.
So the tables would turn and it was every class. It was kind of funny how that worked. But it was, again, it was a bonding experience for the females that were there. And I wouldn't discourage anyone to go into it. Physics is fascinating and it's the basis of all the other sciences. And as a physicist, I can say that. But,
Yeah.
without physics, there's no chemistry. Without chemistry, there's no biology. So it all goes back to physics. Right?
So, well, I mean, I will say maybe if you can feel that way about physics being the basis of science, but math is the basic of everything.
That's true. And I want to go back to your point about like, math. And I think it's a real shame in this country. It's like you would go to a dinner party and say, I can't read, right? But you can go to a dinner party and say, well, I'm not good at math. And I just think that there has to be like a cultural change. And I think that the way that we teach math in this country or have taught math has not been very conducive to people feeling comfortable with it.
Right.
I actually do think, and this is probably a controversial statement, that the Common Core math and the way they do it now is actually going to help this current generation of children really get a firm understanding of what math is. And I think it's hard, this transitional phase, as if you're a parent and learned math the way that you and I'm sure learned math, it's difficult to help your kids the way that they're learning math now. But eventually, within the next generation or two, I think we're going to see a lot of an explosion of math literacy because of the way it's being taught.
That's a good thing. I'm not 100% sure on the new way. I've seen parts of it, like fractions. I've seen the little square they do now, and they draw in these lines in it, and it looks like Chinese to me. I don't know what's happening. However, if someone was to show it to me and explain it to me, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to catch on and be able to help. But so how do you know about the Common Core? Do you work with students, or do you see the math now?
When I was in college, one of the ways that I paid for school was by tutoring. And then we had a program here in Jacksonville where free tutoring was provided to low-income students.
Okay.
In certain schools. And so I volunteered and well, I mean, I got paid for it, so it wasn't volunteer, but it was a job
Right.
that I had, and I was able to get exposure to it that way. And it is, coming from a way where we were taught to memorize everything to the way that they're learning it now. But I really believe in the changes that they've made, and kids today are going to have a much more intuitive understanding of math. A lot of the kids that I taught that were older, they had problems with math because like maybe they were absent when they taught division in second grade or something, and they never really got it.
Right.
But the kids today learning Common Core shouldn't have those same gaps because they're not relying on memorization, they're relying upon competency.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen, like I said, I've seen parts of the new math, and this was in junior high. I don't even know what they're doing in elementary or high school. But to attest to what you're saying, one of the things when I talk to, especially young girls, about going into STEM, and they're saying, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. I said, I wasn't good either. Math wasn't my forte. I was half asleep through physics, not going to lie. Like halfway slept through the class in physics because I was just like, it was boring. And I didn't get it. But I took it. And I passed because it was something I needed for my degree. So just because you're not good at it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it and you shouldn't attempt it and, do what you have to do to get to the point that you want to be at.
Yes, and it's really unfortunate because you don't get to see how beautiful math is until you're past Calc 1 and Calc 2 and Calc 3. And you don't get to see the awesome power that it has until you get to like differential equations and linear algebra. And unfortunately, you don't get to that point until you're like a junior. in college. And so a lot of people get lost along that way. But I
Right.
had a math teacher who told me, math is like a beautiful, beautiful sunny beach. But in order to get to that beach, you have to walk through the swamp, and so just keep on going because sooner or later you're going to get to the beach.
Right. And I'm sure that's absolutely true, and that's just the difficulty about it, cuz not only is it the way that we learn possibly, but it's the way that it's taught and it's the teacher who's teaching it. One of the reasons I was more into science and going into like animal science is because I had teachers who were like, "This is amazing. Look at all this beautiful life and look at all this stuff." So it takes a teacher who's excited. And I've definitely been in classrooms where the teacher is not excited. They're like, "This is what it is. Just do it." And they're not going to be excited about that.
No, and that's so important. It's so important to have teachers who are not only competent in the subject but are enthusiastic about it.
Right.
And I feel like teachers get a really rough rap. They get it from every direction, but the sciences especially are difficult, and it kills me. I sometimes I wonder why STEM is so unpopular because it's so interesting. If you have a mild curiosity or any curiosity about things, and as curious as children are, it's just a kind of a thing of keeping that curiosity going. And we as a society, I think, have to do a better job with that. And I think
Right.
it's also on scientists as well.
Right. Same. Trust me, I understand. One of the biggest things about being out here, like I went to school in Alabama, and I lived in Texas, and I did a program in Vermont, and no one, I just say, "Hey, I'm Kat. I'm in science. I'm a scientist." No one questioned it. I come to California, where I'm born and raised, which is supposed to be very liberal, and everybody is all open and stuff. And I tell them I'm a scientist. They're like, "Oh, I've never met a scientist. I've never met a black female scientist." It's like, what? How? How? This is like everyone talks to everyone. Y'all talk so much, so bad about the South, but no one questions me in the South. Yet
Yes.
I get questioned here about it. So I don't understand. So I
Well, I think
don't
it's
know.
hard for scientists too because we tend not to be the most social group, but I think it is important to get out there and talk about what you do and what makes it fun. I mean, I love my job and it's super interesting. And everybody that I talk to when I'm on planes and stuff, and they ask me what I do, they're so interested and they want to ask all these questions about it. And I wish that, you know, environmental science as a field tends to have more of a parity between women and men. Um, Not as many people of color as, of course, I would like to see, but
Mm-mm.
um, and I would encourage more people if you're interested in any kind of science, pursue it. There's so many different things you can do with it, and that's another thing that we also, as a society, do a really bad job of is letting people know or letting children know the kind of jobs that are out there. I think when I was younger, I thought, teacher, lawyer, doctor, but
Mm-hmm.
there's so many more things out there that you can do with those degrees.
Right. Like I always tell them, I mean, part of the reason I do this show is because STEM is an umbrella term. Even biology is an umbrella term. Right? Even with biology, you got micro, animal, oceanography, ornithology. Like you have so many ologies that falls under biology that students don't know, but it's not their fault because the teachers don't know and the parents don't know, and so it does take people like us to get out there and show them that there are these opportunities out there. So
Yes.
I
And that's one of the
thank you.
things I really like about my job too is when I thought of what my career as a scientist would be, I kind of even pictured it as being in a lab, and I didn't want to do that. But there are a lot of jobs like mine that don't require being in a lab. Like we have a gentleman who works for us that does wetlands delineation, and he also does like bird watching. Because one of the things that we're looking for when we go out to these sites is to make sure that whatever development is going to happen is not going to impact any endangered species. So we'll send somebody out to look to see what kind of bird species are available or in the area that might be endangered if they cut down this tree or if they build this building. And that's all, outside stuff. And you see such beautiful things
Yeah.
being on the road in the job that I do.
That's amazing. And I think some people don't realize that, yes, you might want to build your house here, or, especially out here, people are trying to build more and more into the redwoods, into the mountainside, and then complain that they see wildlife in their backyard. Oh, there's a bear. Oh, there's a mountain lion. Well, what did you think? Like, you're in their habitat. But I don't think people consider it when they're building something, or they see something being built, or they want something being built. So if you can, try to explain what's happening when you take a natural habitat and you start to try and build into it.
Well, first of all, just because a habitat looks pristine doesn't mean that it is. So something that I've run across frequently, and this is especially prevalent in the Northeast, but also in some parts of the West, is that for years and years and years, these businesses had very poor practices. They just didn't know. So for instance, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was common practice to just take your waste and, put it in the local canal. And then later on, their solution to that was to cover it all on concrete. But it still infected the water and things like that. So the house that you're building that looks like it might be on pristine land might not be. It could be contaminated in some way, which is one of the things we look for. Mm-hmm. If you're going to build out, it is a huge problem. One thing definitely is wildfire risk. The closer you get into these habitats, the harder it is for the fire protection to protect your home. And the more you're going to come into contact with wildlife, and as humans, it seems like our typical reaction to wildlife is like to kill it, instead
Mm-hmm.
of respecting that, like, you've gone into its house.
Right.
Every time you go into the woods, like, you're going into its home.
Right.
And it's more scared of you than you are of it. There's simple precautions that you can take. I do think, though, that it is a myth that that environmentalists or environmental scientists are always at loggerheads with business, because we're not. And my experience, working in the private sector, I'm not a regulator or anything like that, but my experience with regulators has been that they're always trying to work with you to try to give everybody a win-win situation as much as they can. I don't think anybody's anti-development so much as we're about smart development.
Okay. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Um, all these old companies dealing with this and dumping their waste. What is, like, or do you know the best way for these types of companies who might, let's say, electronic waste? What do we do with electronic waste so that it's not impacting our environment?
So every state has either a Department of Environmental Protection, or they might call it the Department of Environmental Quality. They might call it their Environmental Protection Agency. They all have different names, DEQ, DEP. But if you look up your state, that will tell you. And I mean, that department in each state, their whole purpose is to make sure that you're doing things in the most sustainable environmental way. And they have programs available. For instance, there was a site that I did in California where it was an auto dismantler. It's what we would probably call like a junkyard back in the day, but now they call them auto dismantlers.
Oh, yeah, make it sound better.
Yeah, and so they had a relationship ongoing with the local county regulator. And especially in California, you guys have a lot of local county level EPA type situations. And these regulators would come out and teach them basically how to get rid of their waste, how to label it properly, where you should put it. It's hard to say in a nationwide sense what you should do with your waste. I would contact your state DEP or your local waste management people, and they can tell you. But there are all those resources available, and typically, especially in the Northeast or the South, there's one general location point that you would take that stuff to and drop it off, and then they direct you which dumpster they want you to put it in, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that sounds good. I never knew. We have just in San Francisco, I see quite a few electronic waste shops. So then you can bring your, big electronics or even small electronics to them, and then they will handle it for you, which is cool because a lot of times outside of that, I see people just putting stuff on the streets and just like, either somebody can take it or maybe the dump trucks will take it. But there should be a certain way that we're getting rid of our waste.
Yes. Oh, and recycling it too, because a lot of the rare earth metals get put into our cell phones, into our computers, and rather than continuing to mine them in kind of sketchy locations around the world, it would be better to recycle them. And that's why there are shops, because they can make money doing it, just like you can make money with scrap metal.
Okay, yeah. So I think that is an amazing feat. I believe we have 6 minutes now left in our 30-minute talk. I have one question and one comment. The question is, if someone was interested in going into being a field scientist, what would be your advice? And then the comment, it would be, is there anything you would want to tell the audience about being in the field or being a field scientist or anything like that that you want to share?
Well, if you are interested in going into environmental science, it's a very broad field. Typically, the kind of jobs will require that you either have an undergraduate in environmental science or environmental engineering. And if you go into environmental engineering, that's more of like, so environmental science is more identifying what the problem is or making sure a problem doesn't happen. And then environmental engineering is more, okay, we've located this problem. These are the steps that we need to take to remediate it. So depending on whether or not you want to like fix the problem or identify the problem is what field you go into. Another field that nobody really talks about is geology. And a lot of environmental scientists have an undergraduate degree in geology because so much of it is, what's going on in the ground. I'm sorry, what was the last one?
Oh, no, it's just whatever you wanted to share, anything that you thought was prevalent or you wanted people to know about you or what you do. Like, this is like your open mic time.
First thing is, if you have a dog, please keep it on a leash. One of the banes of my existence is going into rural areas or even urban areas where there's a large population of feral dogs. It's always very scary to have to go into a site. There's several times where I've been stuck in the car because somebody's dog, and everybody always thinks their dog is friendly. And I just want to say it's because it's your dog.
Right. It's friendly to you, not to everybody.
Right. Yes. And then also, if you are going to purchase property or if you're going to develop property, a lot of the laws that govern commercial property don't govern residential property. So for instance, homeowners aren't required to do the same level of environmental due diligence as commercial companies are. So if you're going to purchase a property, you're going to purchase land, do some research and determine what's going on there. Is there lead paint? Is there asbestos? Which is another thing that we didn't really talk about. A part of my job is inspecting current buildings to make sure that there's nothing harmful there that would harm other people or animals. Okay. And that's something to look into. And especially in the Western United States, water is a big thing. Make sure that wherever you're wanting to build or wherever you're going to move has access to continuous water. The aquifer has gone down hundreds of feet in places like Arizona and New Mexico, and that's something that we see and that people who live there might not necessarily be aware of.
Oh, wow. That is sad. And I have so much to say on that and even like climate change and all that stuff, but not everybody wants to hear it, so I will keep it to myself. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to be on our show today. I know it's a little later down there in Florida, so thanks for making sure you had the time. And I appreciate everything. Also, to my audience, if you want to get in touch with Kate, always hit me up, and I will share it with Kate so that she can get in touch with you. If you have any questions, of course, about being a field scientist, I'm sure she would answer it. And thank you for being a part of our show today. And next week, we will talk to someone else. I don't know who yet. But thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kat.